You are looking at two of the best clamshell retro gaming handhelds on the market. Both of these devices are extremely affordable, and you can play all of your favorite retro games on both of these. From your favorite Super Nintendo games, the classic Game Boy Advance titles, all the way up to PSP. Today I'm going to be comparing these two to let you know which one you should spend your hard-earned money on. I'm Trav with Handheld Horizon. Let's jump right in. So right off the bat, I should probably tell you which handhelds these are. So this is the Anbernic RG35XXSP. Quite a handful for a name, but it is a really great device nonetheless. You can find this for about $70 on Amazon and sometimes cheaper at other places. This is the Miyoo Flip version 2. Same thing here. This one you can typically find for about $70. I tend to like to buy these kind of devices on Amazon because if they get to you and there's something wrong, you can just return them, get your money back, no issues. So like I mentioned, when it comes to price, they're about the same, very affordable, and both of them can play up to about PSP, but as you can tell, they are made mostly to resemble the original Game Boy Advance SP. So for my purposes, I play mostly Game Boy Advance games on here. I want to do a quick little size comparison here. So here is the Miyoo Flip version 2. And you can tell it is very, very similarly sized to the original Game Boy Advance SP. Now, the big difference here is that the SP, I think this is a 2.8 inch screen, and both of these devices have 3.5 inch screens. Something to note is that the 35XXSP, it also does have that 3.5 inch screen, but this device also comes in a 34XX variant, which means the screen is 3.4 inches, which means it is perfect for Game Boy Advance. You are going to get perfect integer scaling on this, pixel perfect scaling, so that is something to know. You can get pixel perfect scaling on both of these if you just put a little overlay bar on the bottom, which oftentimes the firmware installed on these does come with that, but it's just something good to know. The other thing about the 34XXSP, the smaller version of this, is that the overall size of the device is smaller, quite similar to the Miyoo Flip V2. So I mentioned this is the V2. The V2 here just means that the hinge is improved. The hinges on the version 1 of this were failing pretty frequently, and the version 2 here, I've had this for probably 2 to 3 months and I haven't had a single issue with it. It is very solid so far. And the V2 version of this one, which is the one I have here, the main difference is that the buttons are much quieter. I'll go ahead and give you a little example of some button presses here. So you can see, even though they are much quieter, they still are quite clicky. Now let me show you these ones. Much quieter, and for that reason I do prefer the buttons on the Miyoo Flip. Alright, so let's talk about the screens on both of these. So like I mentioned before, both of these are 3.5 inch, and both of them are perfectly fine for the types of games that you're going to be playing. Like I mentioned before, I play mostly Game Boy Advance, but I have also played some Super Nintendo, NES, a little bit of Dreamcast, and a little bit of PSP, and those are fine. Like it's gonna do fine, particularly on the Flip V2. The chip in here is a little bit more powerful than what you'll find in the 35XXSP. This is the H700, tried and true, works like a charm pretty much in every device they put it in, but the Flip V2 is just a little bit more powerful. But overall, I would say when it comes to the screens, it's about a tie. They're the same resolution, they have about the same max brightness as well as lower end brightness. So the screens, fine on these. Nothing to really write home about, but they're both perfectly fine. Now, when it comes to the controls, as you can see here, the Flip V2 does have the analog sticks on bottom, and those are nice if you're going to be, you know, playing something like N64 or something like that. But to be honest, this is not really the device that I would play N64 on, so it's more of just a nice to have. The 35XXSP does not have those, but something to note is that the 34XXSP does have them. So if I had to give an edge in the control department, I would probably give it to the Flip V2, mostly because I like the feel of the buttons here and they are much quieter. On the channel, I always like to say, you know, does this handheld pass the wife test? And what I mean by that is, if I'm playing a game next to my wife in bed and she's asleep, are the buttons going to wake her up? And this is one of the very few devices I've ever had on the channel that actually passes the wife test. So very quiet buttons. Get this one if you want to play games in stealth mode. Alright, so let's talk about the hinge on both of these devices. So it is extremely important to have a hinge that is going to last for a long time on a clamshell. Now, the best thing about a clamshell is that when you're done with the game, you can close it, put it in your pocket, and you don't have to worry about the screen or the controls getting damaged. That's why I love these devices. So on this one, the Flip version 1 was notorious for having hinges that would fail, right? The Flip version 2 seems to fix that. Like I mentioned before, I've had this one for about 2 months, have not had a single failure yet, and the hinge is still extremely tight, and it feels very good. You have multiple viewing angles. You have all the way flat. You have this one here, and then you have another one there, and then you have the close action, okay? So that's the Flip V2. The 35XXSP, I will say that the hinge on this one feels a little bit more smooth, right? So you can open it up. It has this viewing angle as well as that viewing angle. So really just two of them. But overall, this hinge does feel very smooth. You can see the closing action is even a little bit quieter and feels a little bit more premium. Just like that. So if I had to give an edge to the hinge design, you can see that there is two different designs here. So that one, as well as one split down the middle, I would probably give it to the 35XXSP. I've had many of these and I have never had a hinge fail, whereas my first Flip, it did fail. And you can see here that there's just like the smallest little crack here. Now this hasn't caused any issues, but it's just something to note. And overall, I just like the feel of the 35SP better. The hinge just feels smoother. All right, so let's talk about firmware or the operating systems that you can put on these devices. So the 35XXSP has a ton of options for firmware. The firmware that I have on mine is called Miyoo OS. Probably the best one in my experience. I've messed with a lot of them. Miyoo OS is very simple. It's a text-based system and it's very easy to navigate. A little demo here of Miyoo OS. So very easy to navigate. You can just go through, click whatever you want. You can have your settings. You can set up collections. You can go and look at your content. You can see here that I just have Game Boy Advance games on here. That's typically what I do. Miyoo OS is extremely community driven, very simple, very reliable, and I love that it has a sleep wake feature. You can see that when I close it, I open it up, I click the button again, and I am right back where I want to be. So Miyoo OS is great, tried and true. The H700 is a rock star at this point for the Game Boy Advance form factor. So when it comes to the Flip, the custom operating systems aren't really on par with the H700, but we do have one called Surwish, which I have really been enjoying so far. It is very simple, very easy to navigate, and it has a very good sleep-wake system, which is the most important thing on these clamshells, in my opinion. You close it, you open it back up, and you're immediately back in your game. So that's something I really appreciate. Surwish has done great so far. I think it's probably not used as much as something like Miyoo OS, but Surwish has been great for me, and I have really enjoyed using it at this point. So when it comes to overall firmware, the general experience of getting firmware on these devices, I would say that you got to give the edge to the 35XX and it might be a little bit unfair considering this chipset has been around for such a long time, but the truth is at this point in time, this is just the better way to go. I really like these community driven custom operating systems, and Miyoo OS is one of the best. Now, I don't want to just say that the Miyoo Flip in general has a poor operating system or poor custom operating systems in terms of the overall environment out there. Like if you just want to get in there and play video games, both of them are going to do that for you. It's going to be extremely simple. But when it comes to the overall ecosystem, I would give the edge to the 35XXSP. All right, so let's talk about power and performance. I mentioned it before, the Flip V2 has a slightly more powerful chip than what you will find in the 35XXSP. So really, what does that mean? The games that you're going to be playing on here don't demand very much power at all, right? It's not like you're going to be trying to play a AAA, you know, a 2025 AAA game on either of these devices. Both of them play Game Boy Advance, Super Nintendo, NES. They play all those very cleanly, very easily. Now there's one difference. Now I like to play Pokemon. That's mostly what I play on these devices, particularly the Game Boy Advance Pokemon games. And when you are training, you know, whether it be EV training, trying to catch a rare Pokemon, you know, something like that, the fast forward option is something that I use in all of the Pokemon games. And on the Flip version 2, you can fast forward essentially however much you want. I typically go like 400%. And the 35XXSP can't do that, or at least in my testing, it cannot do that. The fastest you can get this thing going, depending on the emulator that you're using, is maybe like 200%. And if you're emulating even bigger games, you know, like something like a, you know, Nintendo DS, that is going to go down even lower. So power, you got to give the edge to the Miyoo Flip V2, in my opinion. Both of them do the job that they're trying to do, but in general, this is just going to be a little bit more powerful. And considering both of these are about the same price on Amazon, the price to performance ratio definitely goes to the Flip version 2. And the last thing that I wanted to do is just have a couple size comparisons here. So I'll go ahead and close both of these. Wanted to line them up with each other. You can see that the Flip V2 is a little bit smaller in essentially every dimension. Width, length, and just total size, the Miyoo Flip is a little bit smaller. And it's not a huge game changer in terms of how small it is, but I do notice that it's easier to carry this around. It fits in your pocket quite a bit easier. So overall, you know, just in terms of taking it around town, putting it in your pocket, I give it to the Miyoo Flip. Now I'll also compare it to the Game Boy Advance SP here. And you can see that the Miyoo Flip is almost the same exact size. It's almost as if the designers of the Miyoo Flip were just like, hey, get it the same size. I mean, it's almost perfect, right? Compared to the 35XXSP, it is quite a bit bigger, but I do want to give credit where credit is due. The 34XXSP is quite a bit smaller, very similar to the original Game Boy Advance SP. All right, and if you have another one of these devices, I want to bring them out. So this is the Miyoo Mini, and this is the Miyoo Mini Plus. Wanted to give you a little example of how big both of these are compared to these devices. All of these are pocketable in my opinion. It's just that you feel a little bit more comfortable putting a clamshell in your pocket compared to putting one of these in, which don't have any sort of protection on the screen when you put them in your pocket. So here they are opened, just like that. There is your size comparison. Okay, so coming to the end here, just giving my overall opinions. If I had to pick one, I would go with the Miyoo Flip. And the reason why is because it's smaller, the buttons are a little bit quieter, fits in your pocket much easier, and it has a little bit more power. That's the reason I would go with the Flip over the 35XXSP. However, I could see there being some situations where someone would want to go with the 35SP over the Flip. Now, what situations are those? If you want a more robust custom operating system ecosystem, the 35XXSP is going to be the way to go. If you want a chipset that has been tried and tested and just been put through the ringer and is working like a charm even to this day, go with the 35XXSP. And I think the Hinge is probably a little bit better. So if you want something that, you know, that maybe feels a little bit more premium, go with this one. If you want something that is just a little bit smaller, just in most situations better overall, go with the Flip V2. Now you can buy both of these on Amazon. I will be putting links to both of these below. I want to give a huge shout out to LitNXT for providing both of these units for this video. And as always, no money was exchanged in this process. They just sent over these devices for review, and all of the opinions in this video are my own, not influenced by anyone else. I will link to LitNXT below. You can go on their website. They currently have a sale going on, I think for both of these at the moment, but you can look around, right? I always do my due diligence. I just go and look to see where the best price is at that point in time. So go ahead and do yourself a solid. Go ahead and look around, see where prices are the best. As always, thank you so much for watching today. Really appreciate you watching this video to the very end. My name is Trav with Handheld Horizon. Have a good one, gamers.